Good afternoon. Today is Tuesday, April 19th, 2016, and I will call this briefing meeting to order. By way of introduction to the first presentation, I just want to say that I pulled out some memos that I had sent to my colleagues on the board in 2011 and 12, and some notes from a Florida School Boards Association meeting on restorative justice that we had an opportunity to see about 3 years ago when we saw a presentation from Judge Stephen Teske. So for me and for some members of our board, this is a very exciting day, a long time in coming, and without further ado, I'll introduce Dr. Bohatch, Mr. Simmons, and Ms. Edward. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, board members, Dr. Atkins, Mr. Martin. First off, I'd like to recognize the committee members before we get started. First up, Larry Aguilar from the Q Quality of Life Center. Larry, you want to go ahead and wave to everybody? You know, Larry.
Oh, there you are.
Larry was key throughout the process, and if you're ever having a down day and you want to bring a smile to your face, call the Q. Okay, in the background you're going to hear kids screaming and hollering, and Larry saying, "I'll be right with you. Let go of my leg. Put me down." All of that good stuff, and something out of Kindergarten Cop or something. But thanks for your time. Larry was at every meeting, and he was on time, and which is good for Larry, and appreciate your participation. Rob Dodig, where you at, Rob? Sitting up here. Rob was at every meeting and was key. Lynn Edward, thanks for your participation. Kept me on task and actually reminded me all of the deficiencies I had with regards to conducting a meeting in a proper fashion. So Lynn was excellent. Jeff Estes, assistant principal. Jeff was really the superstar of the project, and silly me for not involving an assistant principal in years past. On the ground, hitting it every day. He was awesome. So Jeff, thanks for your participation. Captain Mike Miller, you here, Mike? Mike? He might be busy, but Mike was part of the process as well. Mark Mora, Chief of Staff. Carlos Negron, MTSS. Sandy Pavelka, where you at, Sandy? Rushing from class to come to all the committee meetings, and Sandy was instrumental in bringing a perspective that was sorely needed with regards to RJ. Ron Schuyler, I didn't see Ron walk in. Okay. Clayton Simmons over here. Great job. In fact, Clayton mentioned to Dr. Spiro and myself and Mr. Dodig that more got accomplished when we had to step out of meetings. So when the district folks stepped out, the school folks took over. So thanks for your participation. Jeff Spiro, April Thompson, Jackie Turner from ESC, and Kim Verbalaw from Gulf. So thank you guys. It was interesting, it was fun, and look forward to next year. Okay, next up. Stakeholder input. We got a lot of input this year. In fact, we went on the road. Rob Dodig, Jeff Spiro, myself visited middle and elementary schools, and we heard loud and clear from the students. One common thread was relationships. You know, they talked about relationships with teachers. They talked about relationships with their principals, and it was really impressive. Rob was especially great with the middle school kids. He seemed at ease, and he reminded me he had a middle school daughter at home, so that's why. But he took over, and it was definitely great. The kids were incredible. So getting out there was certainly worthwhile. They also talked about protecting the classroom. That was real important to them. Removing disruptive children from the learning environment. So next up, the school board student advisory committee. We met with them twice. Rob and I did for 3 hours. The kids were impressive, and somebody brought a talking stick to the second meeting, and it seemed like the kids were wrestling over the stick. Everybody wanted to talk, and the kids were amazing in the ideas that they came up with. So that was a lot of fun as well. Teachers were surveyed. We sent the parent link out. Got over 4,000 responses on the parent link.
Wow.
Yeah, 4,000 responses. Some of the common themes from the parents, they really wanted to see alternatives to suspension. Community service they talked about, and also conferencing with teachers and school counselors as well. OSS for violence and drugs. Okay, the parents really wanted to see OSS not being eliminated for those most serious offenses. So I got that from the parents. Met with Mark and Donna from TALC leadership. Jamie Michael, there's Donna walking in now. Appreciate your time meeting with you. And then Jamie from SPALC. The life group, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the life group. Over 4 years ago, they came forward and really wanted to see a change with regards to how we service students, you know, alternatively, and met with them every year. Reverends Glover, Farnham, in May, so I'm sure there's a smile on their face to see what's coming down the road for Lee County Schools, and principals and superintendent's cabinet. So, next slide. Okay, some of the goals the committee wanted to come up with. First off, relationships, like I mentioned earlier. It's all about relationships. We heard it loud and clear from the kids. Giving flexibility to teachers and administrators with regards to consequences for the code. So really, we thought that was real important. Every kid is different. Every situation is different. Currently, as the code is written, throughout the code, it's really, and I call it the deli mood. I remember when I was a principal, oftentimes I'd walk into a student affairs office and kids would be stacked in there, and you'd hear the assistant principal, second offense, 2 days ISS, next. First offense, 1 day ISS, next. And really not having any discussion with students with regards to the root causes for their misbehavior. So we really want to give the folks, the administrators and the assistant principals, the flexibility to be creative to help students. So we look forward to sharing that with you. And then 2 of the focus areas in the DSP, focus area 3 and focus area 1, reducing OSS, and ultimately kids who are in school are going to improve and improving student achievement. All right, next slide. Okay, the initial work of the committee was really to identify or to redefine or reclassify the number of level 3 offenses in the Code of Conduct. So as the Code of Conduct exists today, more than half of the offenses listed in the code are level 3 offenses, first-time offense. Okay, more than half of the offenses are level 3. So through the work of the committee, we redefined the level 3s and reduced the level 3s by 50% and eliminated 3 of the categories. No-show discipline, which Clayton was passionate about. I don't know if he wants to talk about it later, but he said he would become infuriated walking into the timeout room, and he'd ask kids, why are you in timeout? And they'd say, because I missed a detention, or because I missed a Saturday school. And so that's something that it's not acceptable. If you don't show for discipline, we're going to get on the phone, we're going to get parents involved, we're going to work it, we're going to work it, we're going to work it. The easiest thing to do is to kick a kid out of school or to send them home. So stay tuned. We're really going to put a lot of emphasis on training for APs with regards to working parents. Get them in, get them in, get them in. Okay, parking lot we eliminated. That's pretty much, when kids sign up for their parking stickers, they sign an agreement that lists all the rules and expectations. And truancy, we don't want to punish kids who aren't coming to school. We want to figure out a way to get them to school. Okay, next slide. Okay, first up, you're going to look at the level 3 offenses. These are the most serious offenses as defined by the state of Florida. I'm not going to read them to you, but some of them, I'll mention some: battery, drug sale, distribution, sexual assault, sexual battery, weapons. So these are the most serious assessor offenses. And everything stays the same. A student commits a level 3 offense. The principal conducts a due process school-based hearing. Principal makes a recommendation for the Success Academy. The principal has the option: Success Academy, OSS, expulsion. They have that ability to recommend any of those choices right there. So level 3s, most serious. What's going to change is that we're going to keep the students there at the academy longer. Okay, currently as it exists now, we're looking at 45-day stay, recidivism upwards of 40%. You hear it from principals, you hear it from the folks at ALC. It's the same kids over and over and over and over again. And thanks to the commitment from Dr. Adkins, we're going to provide services at the Success Academy for students, the wraparound services, full-time social worker, full-time psychologist, full-time behavior specialist, where we can get to the root cause as to why they're misbehaving and why they're acting up. So level 3s stay the same, due process, principal makes the recommendation, sends the packet down to me, we look it over, and we move the kids over to the academy. Okay, next slide. That's what it's going to look like in the Code of Conduct. That was an example, for the principals. First offense, there's battery. First offense, level 3. They're going to have to complete a prevention course while they're there, and hopefully the new principal, no, not hopefully, the new principal is going to come up with strategies related to helping kids for the offense that they're there. All right, next slide. Some bullets on the Success Academy. Okay, a lot of work behind this. This is a vision that has become reality thanks to the superintendent. It's going to be good for kids. Basically, most serious assessors, kids are going to stay there longer. Kids are going to get treatment. ROTC required for every student, entry-level ROTC. So kids are going to earn uniforms. In fact, Colonel Madigan was so excited when Dr. Spire and I approached them. He said, yeah, this is great for kids. Currently conducting a national search to find the right fit to work with at-risk students. So individual academic and behavior plans for students. Currently as it exists now, kids come in wholesale, there's an orientation, they read rules, they send kids to class. The goal now is every kid's going to have a plan related to behavior and related to academics. A transition plan, Dr. Spire went over there a couple months ago, or 6 weeks ago, we met with some kids, and there was a little girl that was so angry. She was mad at her principal, she was mad at her school, and we're looking at each other and saying, well, what are we doing? We're going to send her back to the school without any repair. She's going to go back and probably going to get in trouble again. So we really want to look at a transition plan where principals check in with students while they're there. Once a month, visit the campus, pump fist, how's it going? Let me look at your progress. Look forward to you coming back to school, because kids still need to feel connected to their home school. So we don't want to lose that connection between the principals and the students over at the Success Academy. And then right next door is FMTC. What a perfect opportunity to expose students to career opportunities while they're at the academy. Okay? Stay tuned on that. New principal will be named shortly, and the principal's going to hit the ground running. We got a lot of work to do in preparation for next year. All right, level 2 behaviors. This is where it gets a little, I don't want to say tricky, but this is where some of the major changes are going to occur. What's going to occur here is that if a student commits a level 2 offense, the administrator is going to be able to pick up from that plan, or that menu, if you want to call it, for lack of a better word. Let's say the student commits gets charged with disruptive behavior. Assistant principal can charge the student. It could be a Saturday school, could be a AM, could be a lunch detention, could be OSS, internal suspension. Community service is back in the code of conduct, so we're going to include that there as well. Repeated behaviors, level 2 behaviors, can be recommended for the Success Academy. So if we have a student who, the principal's done everything they can do. We've done this, there's a behavior plan in place. They've really exhausted all of their strategies to change the behavior. Principals can now make a recommendation for the Success Academy. It's going to be a more formal process than exists now. All right, next slide. All right, that's what it looks like in the code of conduct, level 2, giving admin the options. All right, go to the next slide. This is the SARC committee. So principals that want to recommend students that have committed level 2 offenses now have to make a presentation before a committee. More of a formal process. Going to meet weekly, and the committee is going to consist of myself, Assistant Director for School Counseling, Lori Brooks, Assistant Director of School Social Workers, Renice Monroe, representative from ESE, Sue Groves from Health Services, MTSS, DJJ rep, and then a principal rep. Okay, and hard questions are going to be asked at this committee meeting. So if a student's coming forward, let's say for disruptive behavior, he's got 18 absences, it could be that Renice is going to say, what has my social worker been doing? How has my social worker been involved? Or, Sue's going to be there from a health, representing health services. I noticed the student's on medication. Is he taking his meds? We're going to dig down and find out what is going on with this child prior to making a recommendation. Lori looking at credits. I notice he's a year and a half behind. What's the plan? What are you all doing? And the committee is ultimately going to make the recommendation with regards to, do we put the kid back in school and provide or make recommendations for services at the school, or does this student truly need services at the Success Academy 90 or 180 days? So really it's a more formal process of getting kids placed there, and we're really going to dig down and dig deep to see really what's going on with these children. Okay, next slide. Level 1 behaviors, once again, they're listed. The assistant principal or the principal, they can look at the menu with regards to what type of consequences they want for the students. And next slide. That's what it's going to look like in the code. And I believe that's it. We'll go ahead this time and open it up for questions.
Thank you very much. Board members, any questions or comments? Mrs. Dozier?
Well, I want to thank you as a board member that I know you have had a lot to do with this. I know that you have been, talking about this since you've been on the board, and I appreciate all of your work. And as I looked over this, I saw that you have tried to capture all of the input that everybody has put forward. And, You know, I think that this is something that will not only benefit students, but I think it will also benefit our classrooms. And I certainly, I want nothing but success for the Success Academy. And I certainly hope that it will be successful and students will see it not as a holding place, so to speak, but they will see it as an opportunity for growth. They will see it as an opportunity for gaining skills that they may not have, communication skills with their peers. Just I see so many opportunities at that school. I don't want to lose sight. I know that there's a lot of angst out there among a lot of teachers. They're fearful that they're not going to be supported in the regular schools. And I want to kind of put that to rest. I've heard from several that have said that they are concerned that, that we're eliminating discipline. No, we're not eliminating discipline, but instead, I look at this as we are tightening things up, and we are trying to make it more flexible for the principals to make good, sound decisions that are in the best interest of the children. And I'm just going to say one little story. There was a situation that tied a principal's hands that I was involved in many years ago. And we cannot do that. We, as a board, cannot have policies that tie the hands of principals. Principals have to have the flexibility because it's their students, they know the students, and there's a code, but they need to have that flexibility to be able to make a decision. And I think the changes that are being made here will give them that opportunity. So I look forward to us putting it in place.
Thank you.
Mrs. Dozier. Mrs. Morgan?
First of all, I love the wraparound services. I am curious about, because I thought in Judge Teskey's plan that they also involved the family and the police. And I'm particularly curious, when you put together the academic and behavior plan, why you wouldn't include the family at that point. And also when they're transitioning to the homeschool, why you wouldn't include the family and perhaps the SRO, because the SRO may in fact be an advocate for that child back in the school. So that was...
Oh, great suggestion. I'll share that with the principal. I think family has to be a part of this for sure.
Okay. And then I guess the other question I had, level 2 behaviors, breaking and entering, forgery, larceny, robbery, trespassing, vandalism, aren't they crimes? Or are they?
Well, it depends.
Okay.
It depends. Every situation is different. A battery could occur, and Doda, you're going to jump up here in a minute and help me, but a battery could occur on campus and law enforcement is not involved.
Okay.
Okay, a battery simply, a student goes up, hits another student, it's a level 3 offense. Now, if the victim's parents want to go ahead and press charges, that's on them. That's totally, Rob, I hope you're nodding in agreement, but that's totally up to the parent and the victim. But traditionally, and Clayton, you want to speak to that as a principal? We don't generally involve law enforcement unless we have to.
Okay.
I
didn't know whether there was a line drawn in statute where you were obligated to bring law enforcement in.
Sometimes there is. If the battery occurs in the presence of law enforcement.
Okay.
That kind of thing right there.
Got it.
So,
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Mrs. La Riviere?
I too want to let everyone know. I see Mr. Schuyler's just has made it in, and all of you who have been part of this process, I really do appreciate it. What I see is that you're pulling together a concept that you're really looking into the child. Okay. Proverbs has the verse that says, "Train up a child in the way they should go." And in the Hebrew of the way, it means according to their nature. And so if we discipline and we guide our students according to how they are innately, we're going to see a lot more success instead of just a pat piece. So I really do appreciate that component. And when I think about the Success Academy, I look at it as a way I envision those students going through a metamorphosis. and that my goal and my hope and my desire for those students would be that as they are going through that, we're seeing them begin to shine and beginning to find something about themselves that they really do see that value and worth that will help them move forward. And I appreciate the fact that it's no longer the 45-day turnaround, because the kids would come to me in middle school and they'd say, I can't wait to go back. And they would purposely, and it totally defeats the purpose of what we want to do in the education of our students. And I agree with Ms. Morgan with the concept of making sure family is as much involved along the way as possible. I know for some of our students, that may not happen. But I would highly encourage, the more we can get families involved, then maybe along the way we're helping with those parenting skills for the younger students that come along. So, but thank you again for your work and your vision and your dream to do something that's good for our students in the long term.
Mr. Tarver?
Yeah, well, I'd just like to add, thank you for all the work. It seems that a lot of times when they make a mistake, and it's just a mistake, it seems like it's the end of the road, and the goal should really be to reset, to give them another chance to get them back on track, and I think this is more what it's like, and I appreciate the efforts to realize that it's just kids are going to do that, are going to step out, and we need to recognize that, find out what we need to do for corrective to get them back on the path and get them started back down the road again. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. So as I was reading through the Code of Conduct, a couple of questions came to my mind, but I'm going to start by saying thank you very much. Thank you for involving all the stakeholders. And I know that when we met with our Student Advisory Committee, some of the words I heard from them, I heard from you today about relationships, about flexibility, about training for the people who are administering the discipline. And so one question I have is how, I didn't see defined in here some answers to some questions I have, like how are we involving our student services personnel, those counselors, those social workers, nurses, the people who have training that's behavior intervention related. That's one thing. And then how, for instance, with dress code or electronic mobile devices, how exactly are we going to ensure that people reading that code of conduct know how to apply that discipline so that it's equitable? And I understand that there's a menu of choices for administrators, some of which are still the same old thing, the ISS, the OSS. So how are we going to encourage people to implement some of those interventions, like the alternative to suspension, and like the counseling component that gets to the root of the problem, like you just said? So I don't see that actually defined in this revised code of conduct.
Okay, I guess I can start with the first question. When we sat down and created the budget for the Success Academy, there's going to be 2 school counselors were allocated, full-time social worker, full-time psychologist. So that personnel will be on site, and a full-time nurse too, I failed to mention. So they're going to be full-time at the academy. So with regards to ETD, it's good that you brought that up because, and the committee talked about this at length. And I'm sorry the pages aren't numbered because it's something to do with pagination in the final copy. But if you look at ETD, it's really, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 different bullets for ETD. The first bullet could be display or use. Second bullet, unauthorized use or camera to record. Third bullet, unauthorized taping or photographing a disruption on campus. Next bullet, sexting or display of pornographic material. So we've taken ETD and really broken it up from less severe to more severe, okay? There's a few of those that fall into that category. Profanity is a good one, for example. You've got profanity, you have student to student. You could have a casual conversation, student to student, student to adult. So the committee worked hard on that, and we were really, really careful to make sure that the consequences fit the different levels of severity within those offenses.
Right.
Does that answer that?
Well, And let me, if you don't mind, let me weigh in just a little bit that may be helpful. One of the things that has to be layered into the implementation of the new student code of conduct is a training plan, which he alluded to.
Right.
But then the other piece that we really haven't talked a lot about is the role that I really see us, where we're using the lead principal to literally drive best practices down to the school level, school by school by school. So that if you have programs, like right now we have programs out there sporadically that are really working extremely well, but there is no real opportunity to do visitation of those programs by other school principals that's done in a systematic fashion. So if one of the things about this lead principal concept is that is the role of the lead principal to make sure that, because if we don't do this, here's what happens. At School A, they are using many alternatives to suspension very successfully. School B, because we don't have somebody doing the follow-up, then you see the no-show discipline. I do see that across the district where we don't exert because I can tell you, having done it, you know it, if you've been involved in this, to get students to detention and Saturday schools and alternative schools, that requires a lot of work. But it's work that is worth it because it pays off in the long run. But that has to be an expectation that we set as a district level, which I'm already telling you is the expectation, but now we have to drive it down to every school level, and that's where the lead principal comes in.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins.
I do want to say that one of the things that was brought up was the consistency factor amongst, that you may have a new AP at one school and an experienced AP at another school. And one of the things that we built in is there has to be some consistent training from the top down where all of the assistant principals are in the same room together and hear the same material together. And that is part of the plan for the summer, where we're all as a group, so that we all hear the consistent message of what's the expectation of the new procedure. The way it was before, we had follow one, go to two, go to three, and then all of a sudden you would get, for the third offense, you'd get students that would be in ISS for 3 days, and none of us wanted to have kids missing class for an extended period of time. So we wanted to have that laundry list of options so that we're able to, our ultimate goal was to keep the kids in the classroom, but also respecting that teacher, that if you have a disruptive child, that, we're able to remove them. Because when we did the teacher survey, I can tell you the biggest concern was the disruptive students and the students using profanity to a teacher. So we didn't want to tie the hands of the principals that you could not discipline those kids, so we could support the teachers in addition to helping the kids. So I think that the consistency, we talked a lot about the consistency factor, and I think that just the training of all of us together so that we all hear the same message, and I think that's already been planned.
Right, and I think that's our goal, is to keep kids in class. And I think that, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So I'm looking less at the academy, because I think that's an amazing program, and I know it's going to be successful just because of the interventions and everything that have been, and the supports that have been built into it. I'm looking at like level 1 and level 2. First of all, setting the culture and the climate at the school is key, because you immediately will have less misbehavior. I know we have a lot of kids right now whose behaviors are a result of some other thing, substance effects, and we have a lot of these opiate babies who are, especially at the elementary level now, we see them where they are inconsolable and have behaviors that are not appropriate for the classroom. So, I want to make sure that we have a built-in mechanism to rule out that kind of thing. And I know I've heard some talk about, different ways that we can handle that group zone to zone. But I'm concerned that at the school level, initially, if that menu of alternatives is not in any kind of priority list, that then it's it's a subjective choice, or, whoever wants to pick ISS that day, or, community service, or whatever. And then it's not fail-safe, you know what I'm saying? So what you said before about the code of conduct having the 1, 2, 3 step, and that was the way it was, and there was no consideration for the differences in the students that you mentioned before. How will the person who's implementing that know that? I mean, is that going to be part of the training? Will there be some guidelines?
Yeah, I can tell you that, what the expectation would be, for Estero High School is that if the first thing you would need to do is we would all be trained together in the summer about the new document and the laundry list, but also consistency amongst the principals about, okay, what are we going to do when the situations arise at this point? And then we would meet, obviously all the APs, I would expect that they are consistent the way that they discipline the kids. If you have a certain number of our letter of the alphabet, that, if you're at this offense, we need to try everything that we can to keep the kids in the classroom and be consistent about the way we discipline those kids. Because I know that if one AP does one thing and another one does another, that might lead to some discrepancies. But also, it allows us to look at the individual situation of the child and say, okay, that this child had some issues going on at home. And I know in our case, we do involve the SRO and the school resource officer. And, if there's an MTSS issue, we have those resources at school as well, and ESE. So I think, I agree. That was one of the big things we brought up about being concerned about that. But I think that, being up front with our training and making sure that all the principals are on board with the document, first of all, which, I presented it to the high school, and all of them were on board with it. They said, we can make this work because we think it's what's best for kids. And then being consistent in the way that we do the training for everybody. I'm confident that we'll be able to, to move forward and make sure that all our kids are being treated respectfully while we're maintaining, helping out the teachers.
Oh, exactly, while being expected to be respectful. So will it be just assistant principals who administer discipline who will be trained, or will you be involving your student service workers, those people who already have training with behavior intervention and peer mediation and that kind of thing? Because when we talked with the student advisory kids twice at length, they discussed the pros and cons of ISS and OSS, and some of them definitely felt that there were times when that is definitely warranted and valuable. But they also mentioned that they had other things that were important to them: strong student-teacher relationships, opportunities for peer mediation, community service, and then we had a big dissertation by one of our students on the value of the ROTC program, so which is a leadership development. So I'm hoping that is going to be part of the preventive part, the beginning when a kid comes to you the first time. Because over my career, I saw kids come day after day, week after week, and end up back in ISS, and no improvement ever happened because those people on your campus who are educated and trained to deal with those issues were not part of that process. And in 2012, when I sent a memo, I said when I observed documents, when we had expulsions and student discipline referrals, I observed the referrals, the documented out-of-school suspensions and prior discipline history, but I did not observe any academic history, school counselor involvement documented, or any kind of academic or behavioral interventions. So, so this progress that we're making, to me, is awesome. I mean, it's great, and I want to thank you for that, but I just wanted to mention those pieces. And also thank you for involving the parents, the teachers, and the students who were interviewed, because I think that's a critical piece.
One of the other things that we're doing in high school, and I got to credit Dr. Spiro for this, but it's tracking the students for the minute that they come into the building. In other words, we're not waiting till they're seniors to track their progress. I know that we all do that, but one of the things that we noticed is to take your ninth graders, and we pair them up with the counselors, and they actually have a meeting with each one of their counselors right after first quarter of ninth grade. but it's also to make sure that we get them involved in something at school. I think that's a big component of it as well. And that, you're looking at the child well-rounded. We're checking on them academically with discipline, but also making sure that they're involved in something at school, which we know that the kids are involved. They'll cut down on their discipline. And that's one thing that we're also looking at in conjunction with the code of conduct.
Thank you very much. Mrs. LaRiviere.
There was just one other point that comes to my mind. Not all of our students, when they come into middle and high school, have been with us through elementary. But we need to make sure, I miss the old-fashioned child study team. I think sometime when we had that word, child study team, it meant something different to our teachers rather than MTSS does. And I really believe that we have to work that whatever their team is, they need to make it known. Our job is to look for the things that our students need and follow it through. And I know we're doing electronic, but it sure was great to pull out those CUME folders and have those notes of exactly what types of things were done in more detail for our students. And yeah, because we are a society now where too many of our students now are coming in alcohol babies and drug babies, and with tons of other issues that they come to school with. So I believe we have to have trust in what you're going to do, but we also want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to provide the support and work with those students that we have in elementary so that by the time they hit middle and high school, they are able to self-control. They are able to self-monitor themselves as much as possible.
Mrs. Morgan.
Yeah, this is a picky question, but I'm going to ask it. Under student dress code number 14, any method of public display of an organization, et cetera, on a person that disrupts educational setting is prohibited. My question is, what is disrupts the educational setting, and why don't you just eliminate the phrase altogether and just say it's prohibited and not worry about what is it that is disrupting the educational setting?
Well, the way that I look at disruption of educational setting is if it's causing a distraction for the students in their education process at school. In other words, if kids are talking about it and it's taking away from them in the classroom, is the point where that it meets a disruption to the educational setting. And I know that's kind of a weird answer, but
No, I get that.
there are some times where we can pull them out because it's something small, and then that's when we would discipline them.
I'm just saying, why isn't it just prohibited?
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm not saying there should be a punishment associated with it. I'm just saying, why isn't it prohibited? Why does it have to raise to the level where it actively disrupts? Why wait for something to happen in order to?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Dodig. We're going to talk about the Tinker Standard. Free speech?
Well, the wording.
I'm sorry.
The wording is relevant in terms of the legal standard with respect to First Amendment expression in terms of disruption of the classroom environment. But in terms of your concern, the standard is not just that a disruption is demonstrated, or that it's reasonable to forecast a disruption based upon the conduct. So the wording could be adjusted, I guess, to address the principal's analysis, believing reasonably that the action could cause a disruption rather than has already caused one.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Dozier, did you have?
Yes, I do have something in regard to this same issue. One of the things that we talked about because of an incident that occurred last year is we've got to have clear definition of what, you can't say if it's disruptive. It may be disruptive in your school, but then in the other school, it's not disruptive. So, and one thing that when we go to training and we are well groomed on training as far as policies. They say you need to tighten it up to where there is a definition for what it is. And that takes you out of the subjective decision-making, because that's when we get in trouble. Because your school allows strapless dresses because it doesn't make a statement or it doesn't interfere, but then this school over here doesn't allow strapless dresses. And I'm just saying that the more that we can hone down, and I realize that kind of sounds contradictory as far as I said, giving the principals leadway. Leadway as far as discipline is concerned, yes. But as far as the standards and expectations, I don't want to see those delineated, because I think we need to have an expectation that students should dress for success. And I see Mr. Toiber's hand up, and when you start relaxing those, and you have heard, Mr. Bohatch, our students have spoken very loudly and very clearly at our advisory meetings. I mean, they believe that in order to be a successful student, that you can't, in fact, one girl even went so far as to say, yes, I have jeans with holes in them and blah, 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 but I don't wear them to school because that's not professional, And, when you've got a student saying something like that, and then you go back and you look at that student's academic performance, you look at that student's activities that they're involved in, you go, her statement is worth something, because that's why she's, the National Honor Society president. That's why she's the president of her school student body. That's why, blah, 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 blah. And so we've got to listen to that. And so... And that's how we as a board get in trouble, because this school relaxes something and this school doesn't relax it. So, and I think I've been very clear this entire time about those things. We've got to have a clear understanding so the principal will understand what the expectation of this board is and what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. And then we won't have any problems.
Thank you. Mr. Toiber.
Thank you. And just to reiterate and to compliment what Ms. Dozier said, our students have been very vocal that they want standards that are continuous. We are not a system of schools, we're a school system. And we need to have our standards so that they're uniform across the district. Otherwise, they're not a district policy. If they're subject to change across all the different schools, then they're not the same. And that's what we, the disciplines can be subjective to the particular instance, but the standard itself should remain consistent.
Thank you. Mrs. LaRiviere.
And there is a clear delineation for item number 14. It says any method of public display, including clothing, nail polish, and other items that may be worn or carried of an organization affiliated with something controversial, that could be up to opinion. But when you get to obscene or illegal activities, that's not, people are going to know what that is. So I really believe that part's going to be a consistent piece. But if on number 6, when you look at the clothing piece, I just want to point out, it talks about strapless are prohibited, but then it says, when you get to the part that says halters, backless dresses, or tops and tube tops are strapless. Tube tops should not be an optional piece. Tube tops needs to be removed from that part if you're going to say no strapless. I might not have caught that because you're a man and haven't worn tube tops. Not that Mrs. LaRiviere has ever worn a tube top, but at any rate. So I would just make that suggestion to move the tube tops into where the strapless items are on number 6.
Board members, any other comments or questions? I just have one more thing. I was just wondering how, I was expecting to hear today a little bit about our restorative justice practices and how that was going to be implemented at the school level, and I know Ms. Edward has some direct experience with that, so I didn't know if we were going to hear a little bit about that for,
You want her to
us-
share what she's doing at her site or the training plan?
well, I think, why don't we start with what she's doing at her site, and then you can tell about the training plan, because I think that that's important for us and the viewing audience to have an update on that.
I'd like to go back to your question that you asked previously about getting everybody involved and on board, and from a preventative aspect. So I will share with you that I've had the great pleasure of having a wonderful parent, Dr. Pavelka, who is part of Florida Gulf Coast University's staff, as well as a national restorative justice expert. And so she was the one that actually introduced to us, when we merged, the concept of restorative practices. And what we did is we did a lot of research. We went and visited some other schools, and we came up with a system of support. And I think that's what we use so that we know that everybody's involved. The system of support included training not only the administration, but all of the teachers and the students and all of our ancillary support that comes to our school. And we have on a regular basis what we call preventative circles. We use our character education word of the month. All of the teachers have been trained. We have people on staff, our guidance counselor, our Right to Succeed teacher, who can go in and assist teachers in the process if needed. But it offers a great opportunity for students to get to know one another and for teachers to get to know the students, and that goes back to that relationship piece. When we have an incident in the classroom, we use more of a corrective circle, where we will take a few minutes, form a circle, and have some conversation about what happened and what we can do to correct it, because it's all about correcting the actions. It's not about punishing. And I'm a firm believer in that, regardless of what the action is. Let me see. I want to share one quick example with you. We have had several schools come and observe what we're doing. They've gone back, and I followed up with them to ask them what components they're using, because what works for us isn't necessarily going to work for another school, but we can all glean from one another best practices. And quite honestly, our Right to Succeed program are bits and pieces that I took from Clayton School when he was at Okamic Middle School. And that's the best part of teaching. You're always a teacher. You borrow from other people. But we had a situation the other day in a classroom where the teacher uses preventative and restorative circles on a regular and routine basis. And we had a new student to the school. 5 days he was there. And I don't know a lot about his history or background, but we had an incident with him and his behavior in the classroom. And what was remarkable to her that she commented on was the fact that her students understood what was happening with him and how they should react or not react to him. And it ended up being a very peaceful closure. We still have to work with the student on some corrective action, but it is about training the students in how to react and act when they find themselves in situations that aren't what we would call necessarily conducive to education. But I'm a firm believer that we teach students academics, and we also are in the job of teaching students social and emotional behavioral practices as well. So that kind of gives you a quick update as to what we're doing at the Alva School. I will share with you, we have reduced our out-of-school suspensions significantly. We track them according to PBIS. We're a PBIS school. So we track them based on the number of days suspended out of school. And we're excited about the innovation grants that Dr. Atkins is providing, because it's our hope that we can even reduce that more by having an innovative program in addition to our Right to Succeed program next year.
That's great. So then you have the data that shows
I
that,
do.
that the investment of time and manpower
I
gives you
do.
a good return.
I do.
Thank
And
you.
my teachers will tell you it's about developing a culture built on relationships.
There you go.
Thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, real quick on the plan, we're looking at training 20 schools last week of June, 5 members from each school in the Train the Trainer model. So Dr. Pavelka will be involved with that. We're looking at a 3-year plan overall before we have full implementation for the district. And we looked at districts across the state that have went full-blown. RJ, we're limiting OSS, has failed miserably. So with regards to the training piece, we're looking for pilots, We're going to move. Boom, boom, boom. 3 years, hopefully, it's a perfect world. See you smiling.
Thank you very much. That's good news. Appreciate it. Okay, any other questions or comments, board members? Thank you very much. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate this, and thanks to the whole team.
All of you.
And as we're transitioning, I just want to also echo my my appreciation for the work of the committee and leadership of Dr. Bohatch and Dr. Spiro, Mr. Dodick, all the work, the community partnerships. Larry, I appreciate it. I mean, the queue has been there for me in the past, as we've talked about, so I really appreciate you being a part of this process. I do have to just say, board, I want to give my thanks to you in particular, because this is innovative. You can't do that unless you create an environment that allows that innovation to take place in, and you've done that. What doesn't get publicized very often is the conversations that we have individually about these types of issues, and that helps provide us the direction and know that we're going to have the support. So I was pretty confident as they walked in here today that this is something that you would appreciate, and I just wanted to thank you for your support of this effort.
Thank you very much, Dr. Atkins. So next on the agenda is Chapter 5 Policies Pre-Briefing. Dr. Pruitt, Ms. Elkin. I can't see. Oh, yes, Mrs. Zazzaro. I had to put my glasses on.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, board members. Dr. Atkins. We are here for Phase 3, or 3 of 4, so only one more time we'll bring you for pre-briefing with Chapter 5. We have 3 policies that we previously talked about with some minor changes that were recommended the last time we were here. And we also have 10 new ones. And as Dr. Atkins mentioned, Rita Zazzaro is here with me and Dr. Pruitt, and also Robert Morgan participated in this, as well as a number of district staff members.
So good afternoon, Dr. Atkins, board members. We're going to begin with former policy 5.06, which is now 5.05, and this was pre-briefed to you on February 9th. And the only change since that last briefing was the addition of the word "or designee" to Section 3, line 43. And please stop me at any time if you have questions or comments. Then next up is also policy that was pre-briefed on March 8th. And that is former policy 5.13, which is renumbered to policy 5.14. And there were just some, we had discussion around this one, but what we didn't have is the specific changes that aligned it with the human resources structure. And then there was an addition to number 2 about the documents being made available, you know, at the time allowed and what was allowed, and the addition of the new statute that is applicable to this policy.
And the next one is policy number 5. Thought it was. Thank you. The next one is policy 5.15. That has been renumbered to 5.16. It was pre-briefed to you on March 8th, and the changes in this policy since the last briefing has been just to add accept the SPALC employees to the foundation deduction. And then the next policy is 5.21. We've renumbered that policy to 5.24. We just added some clarifying language and added additional statute information to this policy.
Okay, next up is This is now we're starting on some new ones that you have not seen before. First up is current policy 5.22, which is going to be renumbered to policy 5.40, and it's on personnel assessment. And it is a change of wording to align with the current structure in human resources, and along with just adding language that follows current practice, and that is for letter J, where we included along with any written employee response to the evaluation. This is our current practice, it's just was not written in board policy. Next up is current policy 5.24. Going to be renumbered to policy 5.27. And again, just some minor changes there with wording, and then changing to human resources, and then the addition of that new statute. Next up is current board policy 5.25, which will become policy 5.28. Minor changes and the addition of the corresponding statute. And the next one is Board Policy 5.26, which will become Board Policy 5.29. And this one was actually, the changes were made primarily with Robert Morgan through transportation. And the main point was to update it to align with the SPALC contract. And in addition, to include the applicable new statute. And then next is policy 5.27, which will become policy 5.30. And an only addition there is the addition of the statute. And next up is board policy 5.29, which is going to become policy 5.31. And I'll outline what the changes were. This was really a Mr. Martin and Mr. Dodig, but I'm happy to go through it, and then if there's any questions, they can answer them for you. So again, the renumbering, and then if you follow along in number 3, it removes the requirement that complaints be in writing. It's encouraged, but it removes the requirement of that. Number 4, outlines the inclusion of professional standards, and that if it's severe enough that professional standards will become involved in that process. Number 6 defines the role of the superintendent in process of employee discipline investigation, and no arbitrary termination of investigation. And I believe these were from the recommendations that came out from Mr. Martin, your recommendations.
You may recall, board members, that in February of 2013, the Florida Department of Education Office of Inspector General performed an investigation concerning allegations against the then superintendent. And in the course of that investigation report, the Inspector General recommended certain revisions to this particular policy, and all of these revisions are those that were recommended from the IG.
Thank you. Then the next was in number 7. It establishes the process to report allegations of misconduct if they're misconduct on behalf of the superintendent. And then number 17 is an addition that prohibits retaliation against employees who may report misconduct of the superintendent or of other employees. And then that additional statute was also cited. Next up is current board policy 5.30, which will become board policy 5.32. And again, I'll review these. If you have any questions, I'm sure Mr. Martin or Mr. Dodig can address them. But kind of going through, it really just included language to include discrimination, adds the definition of unlawful discrimination is prohibited by this policy, and it also clarifies the procedure for the complaint against the superintendent and addresses what that process is if there is a complaint. It also clarifies the public record status of investigative files. And it also, and that what I just stated is in number 24 there in that last paragraph about when the records can be made public. And then the applicable statutes have been added that are relative to this board policy. And then one more. Current board policy 5.31, which will become board policy 5.33. And it simplifies the title. It also adds the definition of unlawful discrimination prohibited by the policy. Includes pregnancy as a protected class. Clarifies the procedure for the complaint against the superintendent, and again, clarifies public record. And that would be all the way at the end there in old 23, new 24. And then, I apologize, the very last one, current policy 5.32, which will become policy 5.25, and that is the change, is the renumbering. So at this time, be happy to entertain any questions or comments.
Board members, questions, comments? Mrs. Dozier?
Not really a question, but a comment. You know, there are a lot of districts that actually pay for this service, and I just want to acknowledge the work of the staff and for all of this work, because I know, you know, looking into everything of how you have to change the policies, it is a tremendous amount of work, and I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Mrs. LaRiviere?
I concur with that because I don't believe that our community recognizes that fact, because many staff hours are used for this, and many of you go above and beyond your work. Definitely those of you who are on salary put in more hours than that salary requires, but we would be paying a lot more out of pocket if we had a big company do that for us. And so I just appreciate that. Policies, can some of these policies, after they're adopted, be revisited? Should we want to make an adjustment in what we do for our employees? The policy I'm referring to is specifically 5.15, now 5.16, that has to do with payroll deductions and reductions. And there is something I have in the back of my mind that I think we may want to make an adjustment on based on needs of our staff financially. So, but my question is, we'll be able to go ahead, later amend this. Am I correct? Okay. Thank you.
Of course, you'd have to go through the same process, through the public hearing process and rule adoption process. But yes, it could, after adoption with these revisions, be revised again in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you very much. We really appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Coming up next is Mr. Mora with information regarding policy 9.11, naming rights for schools and district facilities. Welcome.
Good afternoon, board members. Dr. Atkins, Mr. Martin. I'm here today to review the draft policy for naming rights. It's board policy 9.11. I believe you're familiar with this policy. We've brought it to briefing a couple times. And I just know you've had it in front of you and probably had an opportunity to review it, and I just want to ask if you have any questions in regards to the policy that I can answer.
Board members, questions, comments? Wow.
If you don't mind, I'd like to take the opportunity to mention to you that we did pilot this policy and process with 2 naming rights requests. If you may recall, the policy does have 2 types of naming rights. One is naming rights in consideration, which is typically reserved for somebody who's making a financial contribution to the district for one reason or another. The second type is for honorary purposes. It's naming rights in recognition. And the 2 that we piloted were for recognition. And I'd just like to review them real quickly with you. We did follow the policy to a T. We did organize committees at both the district level and at the school level to run through the process. We thought it might be a good idea to test it this way. The first one was Andy Harley Field at Pine Island Elementary. It's in honor of Andy Harley, who was, to many that live on the island, the father of youth baseball on Pine Island. Not only did Mr. Harley teach the fundamentals of baseball to the youth on Pine Island, he also taught many life lessons such as hard work, sportsmanship, never giving up, and self-belief. So they would like to name the baseball field there on the campus after Andy Harley. The second was Jeff Summer Field at Estero High School. I'm sure you're all familiar with Coach Summers. He was the face of Estero High School athletics. He had a contagious and positive, uplifting spirit that touched the lives of many students, staff members, parents, and community members. So just 2 examples of naming rights that we'll be using this policy going forward with.
Comments, questions? No. Thank you, that's good
Thank you.
news.
Thank you very much, board members. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, we appreciate yours. And following right behind is Dr. Denise Carlin with an accreditation progress report. Welcome. Good afternoon,
Thank you
Dr.
very
Carlin.
much. Good afternoon, board members, Dr. Atkins and Mr. Martin. It's a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. As you recall, our district hosted an accreditation external review team visit in March of 2014. The team provided us with an exit report, which provided us with some feedback relative to strengths and opportunities for improvement, including some required actions, 5 to be exact. Advanced Ed does require a progress report from us, which is due on May 1st of this year, and you have received a draft of the progress report relative to your 3 required actions associated with the board. I do want to assure you that the staff has worked diligently, is continuing this week to work diligently to address the 2 required actions relative to data analysis, as well as looking at the continuum of services for student services in our district. So you do have the accreditation draft report in front of you relative to the 3 required actions, and I'm just here today to answer any questions you may have or provide you with additional information.
Okay. Board members, questions?
Thank you.
I think this was very well done and captured what progress we've made to date. So, I thank you. Did you have anything, Mrs. Morgan? No? Okay. Short and sweet, I guess we're all on track.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your
My pleasure.
support and guidance.
Those numbers that we can just click on like we usually have. Am I missing them?
I couldn't find them. Now, Mr. Moore is back with this information on the strategic plan for student assignment.
Good afternoon again, board members. Dr. Atkins, Mr. Martin, getting a double dose of me today.
We are.
My purpose here today is to present on behalf of Dr. Atkins an update on the long-range plan for student assignment, which will also include a review of the current student assignment plan, as well as what the vision is for student assignment well into our foreseeable future as a school district. As you know, Dr. Atkins has quite a few initiatives, and this is one of the major ones that we have. I do want to just review with you the current assignment plan and some of the history and where we've been and where will we be going in the near future. Some of you might recall that the last boundary system we had for student assignment was in place during the 1997-1998 school year, and at that time we were under court order for desegregation. Shortly after that school year, we implemented a controlled choice system that introduced the 3 zones that we're familiar with right now, and at that time we achieved unitary status and were no longer under the supervision of the courts. The plan that we currently have in place is 11 years old, and it introduced the subzone concept. So you're familiar with our zones as well as our subzones. That's where we are at this particular time. We take a lot of pride in being one of the only districts in Florida of being a true school choice district. There are a lot that will claim to be a school choice district, but Lee County is very unique. We actually do provide all of the parents in Lee County a wide range of choices, and not just schools, but programs as well. Some of the special attractors and magnets that we have throughout the district are available to all children. Our current assignment system has 4 key goals and 4 key features. The key goals help us accomplish what the plan sets forth as a mission, and the key features allow us to accomplish the goals. The first key feature that we have in place are the zones. We have 3 zones, as you're well aware, west, east, and south, broken down into subzones. And I call this to your attention because some of the zone system that we've been using to assign students implicates transportation. I'll give you an instance. If you live in the east zone and reside in E2, you have up to 16 elementary schools to select from. And you can imagine that's quite a stretch of land that we have out in the east zone. We do have students that are being transported quite some distance because of the fact of where they live. So I just mentioned that because as we move forward, there might be something that we do to go away from what we look like now. The second key feature are the preferences, and I like to point out the proximity preferences because that's something that has been done over the years. We look annually at the plan at ways to tweak it and improve it. And the preferences was an attempt to attract students to attend schools closer to their home. The P1 preference, which means students that live within a 2-mile radius of their school, has always been in the plan. But in 2011-12, we added the P2, which means students that live between 2 and 5 miles of a school were given a proximity preference, a weight in the lottery. Not as powerful as the P1, but then again, it did guarantee that assignment if they chose that school as their first choice school. In 2013, we amended the plan to include any student that had no school in proximity. We had roughly close to 3,000 students who lived more than 5 miles away from a school. We thought it would be equitable to assign them a proximity school, so they are now mapped to the closest school. And if they rated that as their first choice, they would have a weighted chance in the lottery of being assigned to that school. The second key preference is the sibling guarantee and the sibling preference. These are obvious nods at the school district's recognition that keeping families together is very important in student assignment. Sibling guarantee states that if 2 students enter the lottery at the same time, they live in the same household, we will assign them to the same school so that they're together. The sibling preference is a little bit different. If there is a sibling already enrolled in the school, we provide them with the strongest preference or proximity, the strongest weight in the lottery to being assigned to that same school. Key feature number 3 is the actual lottery process, and this seems to be probably the most mysterious part of our system. You'll notice during the open enrollment period, the first day we have it, you'll have a line stretched around the parking lot trying to get in there because parents believe being first in line guarantees them that their number will come up and they'll be assigned to their choice school, which is not the truth. We run the lottery actually this week, and we've collected applications since the middle of January. All of those applications get the same consideration. So in this particular process, the parents will rank all of the schools available to them. And again, like I mentioned, if you live in E2 and you're an elementary student, 16 choices. So parents will rank all of those schools. A computer will randomly assign a number to that application. And after that number is assigned, each application is weighted with any preferences the student might have. And remember, they have to rate that school as their first choice in order for any of those preferences to be active. So those are the key features, and I mentioned them to you because going forward there might be some really good features that we want to maintain in whatever system we move to. I thought it was also important to share some assignment lottery information. Every year we have quite a few students enter the lottery. This year it was a little over 17,000 applications were received. And out of those applications, I'm using last year's data now, of the kindergartners, 87% got their first choice. And these are numbers after the first batch lottery. Those percentages actually improve as we move closer to opening school, because if a student is not assigned to their first choice school, they are put on an eligibility waiting list, eligibility pool, and quite a few of them do get in. At 6th grade, it's a little over 79%, and at 9th grade, 76%. But all around, 80.66% of our students who are entering these transition grade levels are getting their first choice school. Another interesting fact is a lot of times during the eligibility pool, it runs to the second week of school. Student assignment will often contact parents to offer them a seat, and a lot of them elect to stay at the school they've been assigned. So there's some interesting information here. This year we've run some test lotteries, and we're really close to the same numbers, which is a challenge as we grow and there's fewer and fewer seats available to our students to maintain the first choice percentage that we do. Now let's talk about moving forward. The system that we have in place, as I mentioned, the current plan has been in place for 11 years. Things have changed, and the system must change as well. We as a county have grown quite a bit. Our population has shifted, and our demographics have shifted as well. So it's that time that we need to look at a way to assign students more equitably. So staff have begun at Dr. Atkins' initiative to begin the groundwork for the new plan. We've looked at a 3-year period of implementation, phased approach obviously, and at 2018-19 having the plan in place. Again, we reviewed the current plan because there might be features in there and goals that we'd want to maintain going forward. The plan that we have in development right now at a very high level has 5 main objectives, and we'll go through those later in the presentation. So the project, we're approaching this with a project management institute format or framework. We're looking at what the project's purpose is, what the outcomes are, setting some KPIs, and really setting some expectations and gathering data so that what we are doing is accomplishing what we expect it to do. So I'll outline 3 of the high-level purposes of the project. One is to provide for the assignment of elementary students to schools in closest proximity to their homes. And if you look at our system now, that's not always the case, even though we have preferences built into the lottery. Based on data that we've collected over the past 3 years, only 50% of the parents actually select their proximity school as their first choice. So that's a telling number, and there's some work that needs to be done to discover why that is. And I'm sure you're aware that we had a survey that went out just a couple weeks ago to kind of get at the crux of what parents are looking for in a school, and we believe that data will be very helpful going forward. At the same time, we want to ensure that students still have that equitable access to quality academic programming and services throughout the district that they enjoy now. So if you're taking away choice, we're talking about those students that live in E2 that go from 16 choices maybe down to 4 or 5. Are we ensuring as a district that those 4 or 5 choices they have now are equitable to the ones that they had prior to us changing the system? And again, looking to be fiscally responsible, another purpose of the project is to realize some decreased operational costs as it's related to transportation of students. It makes up a large portion of our overall operation budget, and we believe that changing the student assignment system will help us realize some cost savings in that area. So again, a project description. We are currently now in a zone-based student assignment system, and we're looking to move to a system that has a greater emphasis on proximity assignment, and we'll talk about what that might look like. We're also interested in reducing the average elementary student travel distance. As you know, transportation has many challenges in delivering students on time, and a lot of times the student assignment plan is the implication. And on the same side, we want to reduce the travel time to and from the school. The students need to be in the classroom learning and not on the bus traveling.
Just, Mr. Moore, I just want to interject here. As we build this project plan, you know, he had referenced some KPIs, and you know, some of the key performance indicators that we're going to be looking at are, you can kind of pull them out of this particular portion of the presentation as it relates to transportation. Mr. Law's in the audience. You know, he's one of these who will be charged at monitoring these. Things such as looking at Q-links and making sure that our percentage of the total operational dollars as related to transportational dollars, that we see that coming down to what looks to be a mega district average of about 4%. we also look to increase the ABO, the average bus occupancy, and also decrease, as he mentioned, the travel time. So just wanted to kind of pull out the KPI portion of this that we will be putting in, that are actually in the project plan now.
Thank you, Dr. Atkins. In regards to the project's alignment with the district initiatives, this student assignment project is aligned with the superintendent's immediate priorities. I'm sure you were all shared with that document, and we were as a staff. And it's also aligned with the district's strategic plan focus area number 7, which is allocating resources strategically. And let's just jump into the objectives. I mentioned there were 5, and these are very high level at this particular time because the project is still in development, but we thought it'd be wise to share with the board and along with the community what we're working on to get some direction. Objective 1.1 is to establish and maintain active and engaging learning environments in all schools. This is very important because in a choice system, parents use these types of data, what's going on in a school, the report card data for a school, to select their schools or rank their schools. So ensuring that all schools are equitable and as far as the way that they're actively engaging students in an environment for learning is very important to school choice. Again, we're moving away from a school choice zone type system to one of a proximity situation. Can we guarantee, can we ensure to parents that the 4 or 5 schools that they now have available to them have those engaging and active learning environments that might have been available to them when they had more picks or more choices? So very important. And you're going to find that some of these objectives you might think really not connected to student assignment per se, and you're correct. We have some codependent projects at this moment that are being, they'll be briefed to you in the future, I believe, but they are attached to student assignment. Student assignment cannot stand alone. It is imperative that we build other projects and plans around it to support what we're doing going forward. Objective 1.1 continuing is looking at achievement and selection gaps amongst the highest performing schools in the schools in need of improvement. And one of the key pieces of data that we collect around this time is first choice picks. We look at all of the schools and what percentage of the first choice picks is a school getting in a particular zone or subzone. And there are quite a few gaps in the district. There are some schools that just receive an overwhelming amount of first choice picks and others are very underwhelming. And again, that data speaks volumes, and what we have to do is determine why that is. That data, by the way, is available on the Learn page if you go to the Planning Department's page, and you can see the selectivity rankings for each of our schools in the district. It's quite interesting.
It's also part of our balanced scorecard. And we do some trend analysis. One of the things, like when I was meeting with principals over the last couple of weeks to talk about assignments, one of the things that we look at is we look at that trend in terms of student assignment data and whether or not a school's trend is growing in terms of it being chosen as a first choice or going a different direction. So just part of our balanced scorecard as well.
Absolutely, and that speaks to the second bullet point here about allocating resources strategically to those underperforming schools, and that includes leadership and quality of teaching. Continue on with Objective 1.1 is looking at the elementary programs and policies and standardizing them to a point where we're reducing the variance amongst the elementary schools and improving the assignment equity. Again, pointing to the fact that we're taking away quite a few choices from parents, and we've got to ensure that the choices that they will have going forward have the same rigorous programs, have the same services, have the same activities, be it aftercare or before care. And we're taking a hard look at that through a committee to make sure that we're moving forward with equitable programming. And lastly, and again, this is going back to what Dr. Atkins was mentioning, implementing a plan to select and deploy high-quality teachers and leaders in schools. And they've already done that with the administrative ranks. And we continue to develop ways to incentivize quality teachers, high-performing teachers, to work in these most needed schools.
So that at our action meeting this evening, we'll be bringing some names forward and good calls. It's really a first step in this particular process where we've identified some dynamic leaders that are going to go into some of our schools that we've identified as significantly challenged. So step in all of this plan is happening this evening.
And I'm sure we're all familiar with another initiative that we have in the district as regards to Lee County's Standards of Excellence. That's under the direction right now of Assistant Superintendent Sarita Ralph. It's very important that we have a rigorous curriculum in place in all schools, and one that's differentiated so that all schools can service all students. If you look at what we have right now in the district, there are some schools that have the ability to service all students. They can do it very well, and others would be challenged. So one of the things that we need to ensure is that when you have fewer choices, all of your choices have the ability to service students of various exceptionalities and have that differentiated learning and curriculum in place. So pretty much the first objective is a look at teaching and learning and curriculum and making sure that we have that all aligned. When you look at Objective 2.1, we're actually getting into the mechanisms and the ways that we assign students. And one of the things that we want to look at is developing school zones or assignment mechanisms that prioritize the assignment of students to their closest proximity school. Right now, we do not have that. Our system is basically the subzones. And you know how it works now. You can go to the schools in your zone, a subzone, as well as the schools in the adjacent subzones. And so when you live in subzone 2, you have 2 bookend subzones that you can attend. That's just quite a few choices, and that's quite a few distances to cover as far as assignment of students. So just to talk a little bit about the things that we've been working on, we're going to leverage the Geographic Information System that we have, GIS as it's known, to do a lot of the modeling that we want to do. One of the first things that we looked at was a system that is used right now in the Garland Independent School District. And Garland's located in the northeast portion of Dallas. Although the district's a little smaller than us, they are currently under a court-ordered desegregation. They have quite a bit of diversity in their schools, and they got a lot of land to cover, similar to us. They don't have the challenges of a river or some of the geographic challenges in the Cape where we have canals, but they do have quite a few challenges that are similar to us. So staff has worked with the staff at Garland ISD to identify what they're doing as far as assignment purposes. And just in a nutshell, what they've done is they've really leveraged their transportation department to establish something called transportation zones. And the transportation zones are drawn in a way that we can move, or they can move students very efficiently from homes to school. So they're located along major thoroughfares and roads that they could be traveled very easily and efficiently. It's not a boundary. It's not drawing a line around a circle around a school and say whoever lives in this boundary goes to this school. Students could actually live in the transportation zone of 3 different schools. They do have choice. So if you have 3 schools in your zone, you rank them, and there's a lottery similar to ours. So they have a lot of similarities that caught our eye. They also have a walk zone, which is similar to ours, 2-mile radius. Those students have priority assignment. And lastly, they allow any student within their district to attend any school, provided there's capacity, and provided the parents provide the transportation. So that's really how they get at utilizing their buildings to the maximum. So that caught our eye. That's something that we will actually model for us here in this district. We'll develop these transportation zones with our transportation department, and we'll use GIS, and we'll run through the assignment process to see what happens. We got to test these things, many iterations. One of the things that we're going to be keen at looking at is the diversity of these schools when we do these types of assignments. What are we doing to the demographics? So we'll do that with any model that we create. The second idea that we've been working on uses GIS as well, but it's a homegrown idea. It's the idea of assigning students to one of 4 or 5 closest schools. So we'll use GIS to map each student in the county to the 4 closest schools. And they will have to rank those 4 or 5 schools. And again, we'll still have the proximity preferences in place, so they'll still have that weighted lottery. One of the challenges here is the density of our county. There's going to be some schools that will have quite a few kids attached to it because it's very densely populated, and there might be others that are more in rural and have fewer students assigned to it. But what we're trying to do here is, in both of these models, is to get students assigned to schools that are closer to home, but ensuring that the same quality is in those schools that they had when they had the system we have now. Again, we talked about the mechanisms, and I thought that's why it was important to review what we do now for student assignment, because we'll have to make some choices on whether or not we want to continue some of the things that we're doing now. I think parents do enjoy quite a few of them, and hopefully through surveys and engagement with parents in the community, we'll find out which ones they do prefer and which ones work best for all of our students. So again, looking at those mechanisms and looking at how we prioritize the assignment of elementary students to their proximity schools. Objective 3 basically looks at reducing transportation costs as part of the total budget. And one of the aspects of this is looking at the way that we route, how we route buses. Are we doing it the most efficient way possible? Are the boundaries that we currently have in place implicating how effectively we can route buses? Is the way that we're assigning students the most effective way to do it from a transportation perspective? And those are things that we need to assess moving forward. And lastly, as Dr. Atkins mentioned, as a KPI, it's these student ride times and on-time delivery to and from school. That's imperative that we get kids to school on time because they're supposed to be there for learning, not riding the bus. So moving forward with this plan, again, I share with you that we're at the very early stages. There's lots of work going on, but we are still at the early stages. Our vision is that we'll have to transition in a phased approach, that there might be some grandfathering with students that are assigned to their current schools now. Of course, we'd provide some gentle encouragement for them to move to one of the new schools that they have available to them. But we do understand that the grandfathering has to be a consideration moving forward. Transitioning to the new assignment plan, and some of the other bullet points speak to this as well. Something as major as student assignment needs to be vetted very well. It needs to have input from the community and the stakeholders and the parents. We understand that, and that engagement is key to developing a plan that's good for all of Lee County and all of the students that live in Lee County. Transportation zones, sometimes when you look at them, they might be prohibitive right now for what we need to do with transporting students efficiently. So moving towards something that is almost a zoneless type system might give us that flexibility and increase our efficiency. We have specials attractors and magnet programs out there. We're talking basically elementary for this 3-year plan, but we still know that going forward, to get that equity and choice, we might have to consider special attractors and magnets. We've already talked about parent and stakeholder input. This afternoon is one example of bringing it forward to the community. We will also be attending our educational forum next week on the 27th as a breakout session to talk about student assignment and what our vision is for the future. Rolling out the communication plan and how we keep that continuous communication flow between the community and the district. And lastly, the reason why we have the plan we have now is because of segregation, and that's something we got to be keenly aware of as we move forward. Equity and diversity is very important to the district, and maintaining a level of diversity in our schools is paramount. The next steps, and Dr. Atkins alluded to this, developing key performance indicators. We are using the ActPoint KPI system right now, the Great City Schools, to collect a lot of these KPIs. So I believe by mid-May, we will have access to data from other school districts, so we'll have some benchmarks, which would be a neat thing for us to have. Establish target measures and goals. What is an acceptable ride time for students? What is an acceptable distance from home that we should be transporting students? So we want to have some targets in place as we implement a new student assignment system. Engagement, we talked about that. Communication planning, we've already mentioned that as well. And lastly, modeling of these assignment processes. I think it's just key to whatever we do. We really have to vet these well. The models have to be run in quite a few iterations before we can put anything in place. So this will be an ongoing effort to make sure that we get the most optimum plan that we can put forward. Again, very high level. We just thought it was important to bring it to you so you understand where we're heading and what we're doing. And I open up the floor for any questions.
Board members? Mrs. Dozier.
Not really a question, but a comment. When we began this plan years ago, one of the things that we knew was that it was a document or it was a plan that would need to be tweaking. And I appreciate the fact that we're out there taking information and trying to make it a better system and also a more cost-effective system. Because as we continue to grow, if we don't do something, then, the costs are really getting very, very extensive and very expensive. And, it's interesting that the piece of legislation that was recently passed that gives parents the opportunity to have choice And I'm not quite sure how that's going to work out yet. The jury's still out on that. But I think that anytime I speak about our choice plan, I talk about the positives and I talk about the opportunities for improvement. And I always invite anyone that has any ideas or any suggestions to please contact, our office down here, because we are looking to improve it and to make it the absolute best, most user-friendly, best programs of selection for student assignment for students. So I appreciate all the work you put into this, and thank you for listening to our parents. Thank you for listening to our community, because it is important that they feel as though their input was heard and their input was actually considered for the changes that we make. So thank you.
Board members, anything else? I just had a question. Did I hear you say that only the school that the parents designate as their first choice will the preferences be applied to?
That is correct. If
Okay.
they have a preference to a school, they have to rate it as their first choice in order for it to be active in the lottery.
Okay. Okay. And I think that's the only question I had now, and thank you for all the work. This is a large undertaking, and I wonder if there's any anticipation about how the newly adopted state law will impact the planning moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Staff will be meeting next week to kind of discuss preliminary what that means to us. We're still waiting for some guidance from DOE in regards to what that looks like for us. I know it's the cross-county enrollment is something that's interesting, especially with the development of the Babcock Ranch. That's a planned community of over 20,000 people, and our schools are in closer proximity than the Charlotte County schools. So that's an example of how this law might implicate us and what we're compelled to do. But again, the magic word is capacity. What do we have available for capacity? That's defined by the district.
Right, okay, so we get to define the capacity, and then there's no requirement that we do provide transportation,
That's correct.
not
Yeah, I didn't
defined
read
in
it in
the
there that we
statute.
would have to, right?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, board members. I appreciate your time.
Okay. Next on the agenda is public comment. Mr. Martin, will you address the issue of public comment, please?
School board policy provides the opportunity at this point in the meeting to address the board concerning any matter on this meeting's agenda. The subject of comment is limited to the items on the briefing meeting agenda. The time allowed per speaker is 3 minutes.
Is there anybody on the right side of the auditorium who wishes to speak? Anybody on the left side? Seeing none, we'll move right on to board member comments. Mr. Toiber?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I went to the EDAC last week, and the NAACP gave their presentation on the redistricting. We did identify that this board would bring that back for active conversation for the 2017 year. I personally don't think that it's prudent for us to bring it prior to the election. That gives us still plenty of time in November of 2016 to bring it for all of 2017 to get it done if we so choose, because then it gives the whole complement of the new board rather than starting, because I don't think the process can be done quickly. But we did present it for the EDAC did present it, and they did give a unanimous recommendation that that does get presented forward to our board. So I wanted to bring that forward. They also brought forward a very good concept as far as what big corporations do, which are called employee resource groups, where there's actually groups within the district that actually help people feel more welcome in our district. In other words, people are coming from different communities, different areas from all around the country, and to come down here, especially from the viewpoint of a minority. When you're coming down into an area that doesn't have a huge minority population, they feel alienated. So some of the larger corporations are actually having resource groups that are actually a Hispanic group or a all the different ethnicities are just a group or a minority group that allows them to work together as far as support group to get to acclimate to the community. So that was something that they recommended, and I thought I'd bring that forward. And the third issue that they brought forward, which was good, is not so much particular to the EDAC. Dr. Atkins spoke at the EDAC committee and did have a great presentation, and it wasn't even so much the fact that we don't have qualified minorities for our positions. We don't have people, period. And so, we went through the numbers, and one of the recommendations that they brought forward was middle school teaching academies. In other words, trying to get students more acclimated to become educators, not wait till high school, but to have some type of an influence so that they understand what it is to be a teacher and the benefits of being a professional in that discipline in middle schools. And so that was just an idea. I mean, we need to put a full press, and I mean, it was not understated at the EDAC committee, and Dr. Atkins made it quite prevalent as far as the crisis that we're facing as far as putting in teachers. And we can't start soon enough to get people interested in becoming educators, and so that may be something to put forward as a middle school teaching academy. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Morgan?
I have none.
Mrs. Dozier?
Thank you. I have a couple of things. Well, the student advisory met, and they basically were discussing the code of conduct and restorative justice, and it was really a very enlightening conversation. And one of my favorite things is to say that, if you listen to who something is affected, who is most affected by a decision, and listen to those individuals, my goodness, what a insight you get. And we really did get some insight from them, and I want to thank those staff members that were there to attend that. Ms. Morgan, I want to thank you for attending the CAC meeting for me last month. It's my understanding that they were talking about the process that we use for development of our selection process. And it's my understanding, Mr. Martin, wasn't there a piece of legislation that was passed that is going to actually requires us to have a component in there for local, about selecting local companies? We weight something. We weight our selection and give them weighted credit because they are a local company.
I believe you're thinking of the last legislative session. I don't
Right.
believe it was this, but yes, there was language.
Okay, all right.
Addressing
Could you
that
provide
issue.
us with that language, please?
Certainly.
Okay. Thank you. Also, attended the Golden Apple. What a wonderful event. The foundation always does an outstanding job putting that together. And, it's funny, every year you think the speeches can't get any better, and yet every single year the teachers just come up with just the most outstanding speeches, and they come up with, this year every one of them had something, a little different twist to it, and it was just such a wonderful, warm, heartening evening. So I thank the foundation, and I certainly thank all of our teachers, not only the Golden Apple teachers, but all of those teachers in the academy, as well as all of the teachers that put in their applications, as well as all of the people in the community that took time to read those applications. Also, I wrote congratulatory notes to all of the girls' basketball team from Fort Myers High School for their win, and I certainly hope that, when we start acknowledging all of the teams, I don't want to forget my girls, because I know we acknowledge a lot of boys, but we've got some girls that are, state champions this year, so I'm very excited about them. Also, there was an art show last week at the Alliance of the Arts, and it's still going on, I believe. I think they might have taken it down. I went there and had the opportunity to see such good elementary projects. It's absolutely incredible to me what our teachers do and the teaching that they do for these students. This week, actually, tomorrow night, there's another reception and opening for the high schools and middle schools, so I will be attending that as well. So thank you very much, and that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, and I'll try to be brief. We're right in the middle of National Child Abuse Prevention Month, and it really is a time for us to acknowledge the importance of families and communities working together to prevent child abuse and neglect, which are definitely barriers to learning. We want to promote the social and emotional well-being of children and families. Learning for Life Character Ed program will hold its 12th annual recognition dinner. Teachers will be honored for teaching character education, and their students will read essays about how the teacher has impacted their lives. Bring your tissues. Entertainment will be provided by the winners of the Learning for Life talent show, which was held in February. The only other thing I'm going to add about our student advisory, because both Mrs. Dozier and I commented on that, is that we did discuss dates and agendas for future meetings, and the kids did come to consensus about wanting to continue to attend school board meetings during the summer months, even though they will not be in school. So they really are enjoying the opportunity to sit at the board meetings and feel like they're learning a lot. On April 11th, Early Childhood Services hosted a poverty simulation day, and I had the opportunity to attend the beginning and the end of it. People in the community and members of our staff were assigned roles to play of a family in poverty and how they go about trying to access services. So some of the facts about poverty as it impacts our school district are Lee County has a poverty rate of 23.5% for children under 18. 3 million Floridians live in poverty in 2015. In Lee County alone, 169,692 families are living below the poverty level. Over 20,500 adults have not graduated from high school. The average poverty threshold is $24,008. Due to this threshold, the hunger and food insecurity percentage in Florida is 18%. And I spoke to Cecilia St. Arnold from Blessings in a Backpack, and she was telling me that as she goes around presenting to the different organizations and gated communities, they have no idea that this many of our students are food insufficient. The primary cause of our homeless population is poverty and the lack of affordable housing. Domestic violence, substance abuse, and mental illness are some of the root causes. There are currently 1,006 homeless children registered in Lee County schools. The number of homeless children who have slept in a shelter has increased 60% in the last 6 years. 1 out of every 5 children in America receives food stamps, and more than 70% of students in Lee County qualify for school lunch subsidies. So the impact of poverty on our kids in this district is considerable. And during the poverty simulation, it was really interesting that some of the staff members who are professionals and other community agency people were actually visibly shaken as they tried to go through accessing services as a family member. And there were senior citizens represented and children, and it was really quite a powerful thing, and I think it should be replicated as much as we can through our professional development, because it really is an eye-opener. Our Florida Gulf Coast University Counseling Advisory Committee met, and they reported changes to the program, which were based in part on input from the Lee County School District. They invited us to continue sharing comments and suggestions and reminded us of the program dependence upon shared responsibility. They requested a little bit more support from school administrations for their interns. Let's see. Continuous systemic improvement meeting. We had a presentation from Human Resources regarding recruitment and retention, focus area 4. And it was prompted a lot of questions and a lot of comments about recruiting versus retention. And comments were made that if we were able to somehow do a better job with retention, we'd have less need for recruiting. So I thought that was a interesting, an interesting comment from them. They also questioned, how will we, the board, document for them the value of their recommendations to us, you know, their reports and recommendations? And I know this question has been asked at other advisory committees. I'm asking for input from the superintendent and his staff and us, the board members, to have some input or some way of fashioning a response for them that we can discuss in June. They have decided to meet one extra time in June to kind of wrap things up, and they formulated a plan to do not only that, but to refocus on the purpose of the strategic plan, and to begin in September, when we have some newly appointed board members, with an overview of the updated strategic plan with emphasis on the focus, and are asking to invite Dr. Atkins to outline his priorities. Let's see, Quality Improvement Advisory Committee also talked about teacher retention, and discussion centered around leadership, school culture, empowerment, support, feeling valued, having enough time, which I know we've made some efforts recently on that. And the last thing on the list was the money. So that was also interesting. I had an opportunity to visit Pace Center for Girls, and they have made amazing strides, and credit their support from Mr. Herman Williams as their district liaison. And they have increased their academic focus and successes, and they appreciate the partnership, and they were touting the success of their transition program as they transition girls from the program back into the home schools or into post-secondary education, how successful that's been, and they wanted to thank the district for the partnership. Yes, the Golden Apple was a great event, and thanks to the foundation for all of its efforts and all of its different programs that enhance education in Lee County Schools every day. And thanks to our students, our staff, for working hard, and our parents for trusting us with them. Okay, Mr. Martin.
Yes, Ms. Fisher, board members, I do have a school law minute today. Appears we have some time. So the subject today is the law and policy with respect to purchase of real property by the school board. It seemed like a timely subject for this day. So section 1013.14 of Florida statutes is the law that establishes a process for the school board to purchase real property. The statute allows the superintendent to enter into an option contract on behalf of the board. That is, to negotiate and sign a contract which must be ratified by the school board. That ratification being the option. The statute allows, it authorizes, but does not require it, the use of an option contract. So for example, the contract being presented to you this evening for approval is not an option contract. It's being presented for the board's approval directly rather than through an option process. Policy 9.01 authorizes the superintendent and specified district staff to negotiate purchase of land on behalf of the school board, and the statute requires that all such negotiations, that is, offers and counteroffers, be in writing. It also establishes that such documents, those offers and counteroffers, and any appraisals of the proposed property become public record 30 days before the date on which the board considers ratification of the purchase contract. The statute also requires that the school district obtain an appraisal of any land that's proposed for purchase of a value of greater than $100,000 and less than $500,000. If it's in that range, the requirement is one appraisal. If the value is over $500,000, the requirement is to obtain at least two appraisals. The statute provides that if the proposed purchase price is more than the average of the two appraisals, that an extraordinary vote one more than a majority of the board is required for approval. And then finally, the policy, again, 9.01, in order to ensure community input in the purchase of such pieces of real property, requires that the proposed school site be reviewed by a site selection committee and by the Equity and Diversity Advisory Committee, and those recommendations be brought to the board at the time that recommendation for the purchase is made. That's all I have today.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Dr. Atkins.
I'll just be real brief. Golden Apple was wonderful, so just kind of my experience mirrors that of yours. That you always look forward to the stories, and so kudos to the foundation and those exceptional teachers. The Florida Gulf Coast University actually invited me down to visit their School of Engineering. So Dr. Baer took us on a tour. I took Dr. Spiro with me and Mark Mora, and the purpose of that was really to just see what Gulf Coast University students experience down there, and to help educate our high school principals and our counselors in terms of the options that is available down in Florida Gulf Coast University. I have to tell you that I came away, as did Dr. Spiro and Mr. Mora, very impressed with their program. They're kind of looking for a niche that falls in between, Florida and MIT, but kind of that next rung of kids. The advantage that those students will receive, besides just being able to attend a pretty low-cost local option, which as a father of an FGCU student, former student, and now alum, it is a very low-cost, high-quality option. But the other advantage that students would receive at Florida Gulf Coast University is low class size. I remember the University of Akron sitting in classes in mechanical engineering that were like 300, 400, 500 easy. And, and that wasn't just the engineering classes, but you go to chemistry, you go to physics, all the science classes that I attended, and it was always, just absolutely packed. Florida Gulf Coast University, on the other hand, only has one lecture hall, and I don't even think it's near as big as this room. The rest of the classrooms are those laboratory, kind of small group, just more like a real world work experience. And so like I said, we came away very impressed, and we're going to suggest that our high school principals and our counselors also take a tour. Did do some advisory committee meetings this week. Curriculum was last night, and just walked away from both the Equity and Diversity Advisory Committee and the Curriculum Advisory Committee, and I know this holds true with some of other ones, but there is a huge willingness to do work on behalf of the district by the folks that serve on those committees. I know that you all have heard that as board members. I've heard it loud and clear, and so we're going to put them to work. And that's all I have.
Thank you very much. We will have a student performance at 5:45 and our action meeting at 6 o'clock. And seeing no other business to come before this board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.